In a single moment, his dignity was stripped away, replaced by a searing humiliation that cut deep into the very core of his identity. Once recognized for his remarkable intellect and drive, he was reduced to a symbol of systemic injustice. A man denied even the smallest respect solely because of his skin color. That public dismissal, raw and unforgiving, ignited an inner fire fueled by generations of silent suffering and unacknowledged pain. His degradation is not just a personal wound, but an echo of a broken promise of equality, setting the stage for a relentless quest to challenge a prejudiced world. Watch until the end to see how this incredible story unfolds, and let us know what time you're watching today. The early morning light filtered through the giant glass facade of the bustling international airport, painting the long corridors in delicate hues of amber and soft gold. Outside, the city was only beginning to stir, a gentle reminder that every day carried its own blend of promises and obstacles. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation and a hint of tension that seemed to vibrate in every whispered conversation. The echoes of rolling suitcases and murmurs of travelers mixed with the overhead announcements, creating a modern symphony of movement and sound. Grace Montgomery stepped into this fray as if she were part of the scenery, a moving work of art in a realm of transient moments. She was a woman of poise and quiet defiance, her sharp eyes scanning her surroundings with an intuition that had often proven to be her greatest ally. Today, however, those eyes held an edge of quiet determination mixed with an undercurrent of the day's recent trials. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that matched her commanding presence, Grace carried herself like a seasoned commander stepping onto an uncharted battlefield. Her heels clicked against the marble floor in a rhythm that was both confident and unwavering. Yet beneath that confident stride lay a storm of emotions, a swirling mix of frustration, injustice, and resolve. Only hours before, she had been in the midst of a high-powered board meeting, orchestrating the day-to-day operations of her multi-million-dollar enterprise with the ease of an experienced conductor. Now, as she approached the check-in counter, the lingering sting of being denied a place in first class still played at the edges of her composure like a persistent echo in a vast empty hall. Grace's mind replayed the incident as she stood in the cool morning air of the departure lounge. The memory was as vivid as the polished surfaces around her. The stunned silence of the attendant, the dismissive glance of a gate agent, and the unspoken bias that seemed to hover in the air like a dark cloud. In that brief, heart-wrenching moment, the injustice had burned brighter than any spotlight. Yet for all the hurt, a seed of determination had taken root deep within her. The idea that one act of slight could unearth a hidden truth about the very fabric of power and prejudice would later become a catalyst for events far beyond the airport's confines. At a nearby cafe where passengers gathered to savor their morning coffees, Grace took a moment to pause. The gentle aroma of roasted beans and sweet pastries provided a fleeting comfort amid the turmoil of her thoughts. Seated at a corner table, she opened a worn leather notebook, its pages filled with meticulous notes and quiet reflections, a chronicle of her professional journey and personal battles. Her pen, a simple instrument of thought, skimmed over the paper as she began to outline her next moves, her hand steady despite the inner tumult. The cafe buzzed with casual conversations and the clinking of porcelain cups, a stark contrast to the inner silence that enveloped Grace. She was a woman accustomed to command, yet even she was not immune to moments of vulnerability. In that quiet corner, her eyes revealed an unspoken story of ambition shadowed by an unjust world, each line on her face a testament to battles fought and victories earned in the face of relentless adversity. The incident at the check-in counter was not merely a setback, it was a painful symbol of the society she was determined to change. As she sipped her coffee, her thoughts drifted to the larger conflict simmering just beneath the surface of everyday interactions, a conflict rooted in pride, prejudice, and power. There was an unyielding truth in her belief that every individual, regardless of their appearance or background, deserved the dignity of respectful treatment. And yet, that simple truth was too often obscured by the tangled webs of societal expectations and unwritten rules. In the reflective quiet of that bustling cafe, Grace resolved that the injustice she had experienced was not just a personal affront. It was an emblem of the broader struggle against discrimination. Her resolve was both an anchor and a fire, grounding her while igniting a determination to make things right. Without fanfare or dramatic declarations, she began to craft her silent plan. Every stroke of her pen on the paper marked the first steps of what would soon become a campaign far greater than a personal vendetta. It was the beginning of a mission to expose the deeper flaws of an industry that had underestimated her tenacity. Each carefully chosen word in her notebook carried the weight of conviction, a promise that she would not be sidelined by petty prejudice. Outside the window, the airport continued to pulse with life. Commuters, dreamers, and wanderers all swept up in the same journey of hope and despair. But for Grace, every face in the crowd was a reminder of why she could not afford to shrink in the face of injustice. The scene was a living canvas of human emotion, a microcosm of the world's unpredictable beauty and heartbreak. In that moment, every detail was etched into memory. The distant hum of airplane engines, the rhythm of footsteps on polished floors, and the undercurrent of dreams deferred by unseen barriers. The narrative of that morning was set against a backdrop of both soaring ambitions and grounded realities. Grace Montgomery, in her quiet corner of the world, was not merely a successful CEO. She was the personification of resistance against a relentless tide of inequity. With a resolve that burned as fiercely as the sun rising beyond the horizon, she resolved to transform her setback into an unexpected triumph. A moment that would ripple through the foundations of power and challenge those who clung to outdated hierarchies. This early scene at the airport was more than just the beginning of a journey. It was the prologue to a transformative chapter in the life of a woman who embodied both strength and sensitivity. With every small act, a notebook scribble, a measured breath, Grace reaffirmed her commitment to truth and justice. Amid the chaos and noise of the everyday, she sought to instill a sense of order and fairness, a hope that would soon galvanize not just her own spirit, but the very structure of an entire industry. In that fragile interlude between past indignities and future reckonings, the air carried a subtle promise that the voice of one determined individual could echo far beyond the confines of a single airport terminal. For Grace Montgomery, this was the moment when the darkness of injustice met the bright, unyielding light of resolve, a light that would pave the way for a narrative of retribution and renewal. And as the final rays of the early sun illuminated her path, Grace's eyes shone with quiet determination, a glimpse into the remarkable journey that was only just beginning. A brisk gust of wind rattled the tall glass doors as Grace Montgomery stepped back into the terminal, her mind still clouded with the events of that morning. The unresolved sting of exclusion had barely begun to simmer within her when an unexpected commotion near Gate 14 disrupted her fragile calm. A well-dressed man, impeccably groomed and exuding an aura of confidence, hastily made his way through the crowd, clutching a sealed envelope. His eyes, however, betrayed a blend of fear and urgency. For a brief moment, his gaze met Grace's, and something unspoken passed between them, a silent signal of impending danger and unexpected alliances. Grace, curious and ever vigilant, felt her pulse quicken. In that split second, the air seemed to condense around her as she watched him duck into a secluded corridor. The mysterious man, later identified by hurried whispers among the crowd as Christopher Wright, was known in certain circles for his discreet involvement with high-stakes corporate negotiations. Yet today, there was something far more clandestine about his appearance. His hurried steps and the way he glanced over his shoulder as if pursued by unseen eyes set a backdrop of mystery that neither time nor circumstance could easily explain. At the same moment, a shrill cry from somewhere deep within the terminal reverberated like a signal for an emergency. It startled the gathering of travelers into hushed murmurs, their collective anxiety building. Grace's internal senses, honed by years of navigating high-pressure boardrooms and turbulent board meetings, told her that this was no ordinary disturbance. With a furrowed brow, rounding a corner, Grace stumbled upon a scene straight from the pages of an espionage thriller. A young flight attendant, pale and trembling, was speaking rapidly into her phone, her eyes darting back and forth as if expecting an unseen threat to manifest at any second. Behind her, scattered papers and a toppled cart of refreshments lay in disarray, a small chaos in the orderly world of air travel. The attendant's distress was palpable, every quiver in her voice, each anxious gesture, hinted at a narrative far beyond a mere accident. Grace's mind raced. This incident, unexpected and charged with raw emotion, resonated with the very essence of her personal turmoil from earlier, the feeling of being sidelined, diminished, and underestimated. But now, the stakes appeared to have escalated into something far more dangerous. She approached the attendant with a calm exterior, yet within her, a storm of determination and curiosity whirled. "I'm Grace," she said softly, her tone laced with both kindness and an unyielding resolve. "Tell me what happened." The attendant, whose name was Emily Collins, hesitated before confiding that she had overheard a suspicious conversation while refilling a beverage station near the boarding gate. Two men in dark suits discussed a confidential package intended for the airline's upper echelons. A package that in hushed tones carried references to covert operations and undisclosed partnerships. Emily's voice trembled as she recounted, I couldn't make out everything, but they mentioned something about a betrayal, something that would change everything." Her words, though fragmented, resonated deeply with Grace's own experiences of feeling betrayed by the system that had once revered her accomplishments. The revelation stirred something deep within Grace. Her mind recalled subtle warnings in past encounters, a fleeting glance, a whispered comment, that perhaps her earlier exclusion was more than mere prejudice. Was it possible that there were hidden forces at work, orchestrating not only her personal humiliation, but also manipulating the very framework of power within the airline industry? As she absorbed Emily's anxious narrative, a cold clarity began to crystallize in her thoughts. This was not an isolated incident. It was the spark of a larger conflagration of secrets, deceit, and betrayal that had its roots in a labyrinth of corporate stratagems. Before Grace could extract further details from Emily, a loud intercom announcement cut through the air, demanding all passengers and staff to remain seated and await further instructions. The sudden command fueled the sense of urgency, and Grace's eyes narrowed with determination. This was no longer a minor disturbance, but a full-blown crisis that threatened to upend the delicate balance of power. In that moment, the realization dawned upon her. The seemingly disparate events, her personal affront, the mysterious courier, and now this alarming incident, were threads in a tapestry woven with treachery. Stepping away from the charged scene, Grace moved to a quieter corner of the terminal, her mind abuzz with questions. How could the airline, a symbol of modernity and order, become a stage for such clandestine operations? And who were the real players behind this unfolding drama? The mysterious envelope Christopher had carried now loomed large in her thoughts. Could it be linked to the confidential package mentioned by Emily, a package that might hold damning evidence against someone high up in the establishment? Grace's strategic mind began to piece together a series of possibilities as she recalled earlier interactions with her trusted colleagues. There was Samuel, the suave corporate strategist whose polished exterior often masked a hidden agenda, and Rebecca, an insightful analyst who had sometimes hinted at unsettling irregularities in the airline's financial reports. Had one of them been complicit? The thought was as unsettling as it was plausible. Betrayal, after all, rarely came without a prelude of carefully orchestrated deception. The intercom murmurs soon faded into a tense silence that blanketed the terminal. Grace's inner resolve surged. She could no longer remain a passive observer to the machinations unfolding around her. The injustice of being downgraded from first class was now eclipsed by the more profound injustice of an institution built on secrets and manipulation. Her next steps would require wisdom, stealth, and an unwavering moral compass. The vulnerability she had felt was swiftly replaced by the relentless drive to uncover the truth, regardless of the personal cost. In the quiet of that moment, as the undercurrents of fear and betrayal mingled with the steady cadence of her heartbeat, Grace felt as though fate itself had thrust her into a maelstrom of high-stakes intrigue. The gentle hum of the airport, a world that moved in precise rhythms of time and order, now transformed into an arena where every gesture, every glance held layers of hidden intent. And within that complex interplay of power and secrecy, Grace Montgomery resolved that she would not only reclaim her dignity, but also expose the festering corruption that threatened to tear the fabric of the industry apart. With her mind abuzz with potential conspiracies and her heart steeled against the coming storm, Grace readied herself for the challenges ahead. The echo of betrayal, hinted at in both the hushed tones of corporate schemers and the desperate whispers of a terrified flight attendant, laid the foundation for a conflict that would test her resilience and redefine her sense of justice. As she stepped back into the flow of passengers, the encrypted signals of fate mingled with the chaos around her, each step propelling her further into the labyrinth of mystery and deception. The stage was now set, and every measured heartbeat promised a relentless pursuit of truth. Grace Montgomery, once a victim of petty discrimination, now stood at the precipice of a much larger battle, a battle that would force her to confront not only the insidious forces of betrayal, but also the very essence of her beliefs. With each determined step, the inciting incident of that fateful morning transformed into a clarion call, a summons to unravel the hidden ties that bound powerful figures in a dangerous dance of secrets, where loyalty could shatter with a single misplaced word. As the terminal lights glowed softly in the wake of the disrupted calm, Grace's eyes burned with unyielding resolve. The whisper of betrayal and the scent of conspiracy urged her onward. Today, her journey veered sharply from the mundane to the extraordinary, marking the start of a saga where every revelation would deepen the mystery and every betrayal could unravel the delicate threads of her carefully constructed life. Grace's world had shifted irreversibly, and as she stepped away from the terminal's charged corridors, the complex web of personal and institutional betrayals began to unravel. In a quiet lounge away from the incessant bustle of travelers, she met with Samuel, a childhood friend turned trusted colleague whose smile no longer concealed the weariness of hidden agendas. Over freshly steeped coffee, their conversation opened up like a well-worn book revisited. "I never imagined I'd see you like this, Grace," Samuel said, his tone laced with equal measures of concern and curiosity. His eyes, warm but probing, searched hers as he continued, "This isn't just about a boarding mishap. Something deeper is going on." Grace's lips tightened in a resigned half-smile. "You're right, Samuel. It feels as though the very core of this organization has been tainted. My encounter today, that envelope that Christopher clutched so desperately, it all points to forces far beyond personal prejudice." She paused, fingers absently tracing a pattern on the tabletop. "There's betrayal in the ranks, and I fear we're staring into the abyss of corruption." As if on cue, Rebecca entered the scene, her demeanor composed yet flaring with subtle urgency. She slid into the booth beside Grace, her voice barely above a whisper. "I overheard something disturbing in the board meeting last week," she confided. "There were mentions of unusual transactions, secret deals, and a name repeatedly left unsaid." Rebecca's eyes locked with Grace's, a silent exchange of pain and determination passing between them. Their dialogue was interspersed with long moments of introspection. Grace recalled the cold, dismissive look of the gate agent and the disproportionate sting of that denial. It was no accident that she had been pushed to the margins today. Even as the three of them delved into the unsettling details, an undercurrent of unspoken doubts bubbled beneath the surface. Was there a conspiracy at play? Could the slight, at first class, simply be the opening salvo in a broader campaign of marginalization? Across town, Christopher Wright paced in a quiet office lined with mahogany shelves and framed accolades. He was not just a messenger of secrets, but a reluctant participant in a game where the stakes were far higher than he had ever anticipated. His phone beeped with a cryptic message. Over the phone, Emily's voice wavered but remained determined. "Grace, there's something you must know. I've been contacted by someone claiming to have documents that prove a deliberate cover-up within the airline. They're willing to meet, but I'm scared. I can't do this alone." Grace's heart pounded against her ribs as she replied softly, "Emily, you're not alone. We're going to expose this deception together. Your courage today is just the beginning." The conversation was a lifeline, binding the two women in a shared mission, one that demanded they risk everything for the sake of truth. In a quiet passageway, Samuel and Rebecca's conversation turned to deeper matters of trust and loyalty. Samuel, usually the embodiment of calm pragmatism, admitted with a heavy sigh, "I've known for a while that our board harbors secrets, but I never thought it would come to this level of betrayal." "Rebecca, have you ever wondered if some of our closest advisors could be feeding information to our adversaries?" Rebecca's eyes darted away, her inner conflict barely veiled. "Every day, Samuel. Every decision I made felt influenced by forces I couldn't see. I want to believe that we're all on the same side, that our struggles are personal and isolated. But today, even a minor slight has blossomed into this terrible suspicion. How do we know who to trust?" Their dialogue was punctuated by reflective silence. Each question they voiced was laden with implications, and every answer served only to entangle them further into the investigation's murky depths. The personal grievances that they once set aside for the collective mission now blossomed into raw revelations. Grace's earlier humiliation had become a catalyst for a broader quest for justice, a rallying cry that brought the trio together, forging unbreakable bonds, even as tensions simmered beneath. Back in the quiet hum of an after-hours conference room, the protagonists gathered to consolidate the fragments of information they had painstakingly collected. Maps, confidential emails, and blurry photographs lay strewn across the table like pieces of an intricate puzzle. Grace leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We have to consider every angle. This isn't just about one person's vendetta, it's a network. And I suspect that the betrayal might cut even deeper than we think." Samuel, ever the voice of cautious optimism, added, "It may be that some of us have been unknowingly complicit. Our roles might have allowed us to ignore small signals. But now that we see them clearly, we must decide. Do we continue down the path of silence, or do we take a stand?" His question hung in the air, dense with moral implication. Rebecca's gaze was steadfast. Taking a stand means risking everything. Our careers, our reputations, even our safety. But the alternative is far worse, a system built on exploitation and hidden agendas. "I'd rather expose the truth than continue living with the lies." Her words resonated with the conviction of someone who had seen too much dishonesty. It was a moment where vulnerability transformed into determination. Outside, as the city lights flickered to life under a velvet sky, a meeting was arranged in a discreet hotel room, a rendezvous that promised revelations and perhaps the first full disclosure of the insidious plans at work. In that charged atmosphere of hushed tones and furtive glances, Grace met with a mysterious contact whose identity remained veiled. The contact, who introduced himself only as Michael, supplied a trove of documents that linked high-ranking officials within the airline to covert operations and undisclosed financial manipulations. "These papers change everything," Michael said in a strained whisper, sliding a thick folder across the table. "They show that the mistreatment you experienced was just a fraction of a larger plan to diminish voices like yours." His eyes, darkened by the burden of secrets, pleaded for understanding. "We must tread carefully. The betrayal may not come from an external enemy, but from those you once trusted implicitly." The revelation struck Grace like an icy dagger, sharp, unanticipated, and undeniably true. Her mind raced, weighing the implications of Michael's words, each fact intertwining with the threads of her past humiliation and the present conspiracy. In the murk of revealed intentions, the script of their intertwined fates was being rewritten one document at a time. In the days that followed, tension peaked as hidden dynamics came to the fore. A once unassailable friendship now flirted with discord, and every whispered conversation carried the weight of potential treachery. The group's interactions, layered with hidden confessions and uncertain alliances, became a battleground where every smile, every pause in the conversation, hinted at a deeper, unspoken truth. Through dialogue, introspection, and shared sorrow, each character revealed not only vulnerabilities, but also an unyielding commitment to justice. As Grace looked at her colleagues, she recognized that their strength lay not only in their individual resolve, but also in their shared understanding of the world's fragility, a world where loyalty could be as fleeting as a whispered secret and betrayal as inevitable as the dawn. In that moment of collective vulnerability, they realized their journey was no longer just personal, it was the beginning of an uprising against a system built on duplicity. Their hearts, bruised yet hopeful, now beat in unison as they prepared to face the coming storm. And as they stood shoulder to shoulder, the unspoken promise of truth and redemption began to light the way forward, even as the shadows of betrayal gathered at the edges of their determined circle. Grace's pulse pounded against her ears as the quiet hum of the night shifted into something darker, a sound that was equal parts dread and anticipation. It began with a knock on the frosted glass door of the private conference room where the clandestine meeting had been set. The room, dimly lit by a single overhead lamp, was filled with scattered documents and the restless energy of secrets soon to be unveiled. As Grace sat, her eyes fixated on the pile of papers Michael had entrusted to her earlier, the silence was broken by the soft click of heels in the corridor. Samuel entered, his expression inscrutable, his usual confident smile replaced by an odd mixture of solemnity and urgency. "Grace," he began, his voice low and hesitant, "there's something we need to discuss, something that I have been keeping from everyone." Her heart sank slightly at the gravity in his tone. The assurance Samuel usually offered now carried an undercurrent of something forbidden. "Tell me," she said softly, her eyes narrowing with worry yet burning with curiosity. Samuel hesitated, glancing at the scattered documents and then out the narrow window at the darkened airport grounds beyond. "I've been a part of this investigation, but not in the way you think. There are things about the airline's inner workings that go deeper than any of us imagined, and I may have been involved in ways that hurt you all." His words were a stumbling confession, laden with regret. Grace's hand trembled as she reached for a document Michael had given her, a file stamped with urgent red lettering. As she flipped through pages filled with financial reports, secret memos, and annotated internal communications, her mind raced. How could someone she trusted reveal such dark secrets now? "What are you saying, Samuel? Have you been leaking information? Are you working for them?" Her voice cracked with disbelief and betrayal. Samuel's eyes flashed with remorse. "I was recruited long ago by someone higher up. They promised protection and a position in the organization if I could feed them inside details. I never meant to truly hurt you, Grace. I just wanted to survive in a system that was rigged against me. And then when I saw your confrontation with that first-class injustice, I thought I could help, but I was too deep. I'm so sorry." His confession struck Grace like a sudden, icy blast. Every memory of shared camaraderie and trust now twisted into something unrecognizable. The room felt suddenly suffocating as Grace tried to process the magnitude of the betrayal. "You were with them all along?" she whispered, nearly inaudible. The revelation shifted the entire landscape of her quest. A mission that had begun with a personal affront and spiraled into an investigation into corruption. Now, the very foundation of her inner circle had been compromised. Before she could demand further explanation, her phone buzzed sharply on the table, interrupting the heavy silence. It was a message from Rebecca, one that she had been expecting earlier. With hesitant fingers, Grace opened the message, her eyes widening as she absorbed its contents. Rebecca claimed that she had uncovered damning evidence linking critical documents to an external firm known for its ties to the airline's upper management. But the message also hinted at something far more disturbing, a pattern of omissions that hinted at a deliberate cover-up. It was as if you must expose them, even if it means coming from a flawed place like mine. His plea echoed in the dim room, mingling with the clatter of her racing heart and the relentless ticking of the clock. Grace stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the cold floor. Your betrayal not only endangers me, but it undermines everything we stand for, she said, trying to steady her voice even as her emotions bubbled uncontrollably. I trusted you, Samuel. All this time, I believed you were on our side. Her words were a mix of sorrow and fiery determination, as though she were sacrificing something precious to protect a larger truth. Samuel stepped closer, his eyes wet with regret. I didn't have a choice. I was ensnared before I realized how deep it went. The higher-ups, they had ways of making sure your hands were tied if you ever defied them. My cooperation was never truly voluntary. It was survival. I thought I could balance both sides, but I see now how naive I was. His confession, raw and unadorned, only deepened the wound in their alliance. Outside, the first murmurs of a coming storm rattled the terminal's windows, as though nature itself were grieved by the unfolding betrayal. In that charged moment, Grace looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting to a framed family photograph on the desk, a reminder of the innocent hopes and dreams that had once buoyed her spirit. How did it all come so far from simple ambition and a quest for justice? A heavy pause filled the space between them as the truth sank in. It was then that the soft sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor once more. Michael, who had been quietly observing from a corner of the room, stepped into the light. His presence was as enigmatic as ever, and his eyes held a hint of sorrow. Grace, there's something you need to know about Samuel's involvement, he said, his voice measured. The documents I gave you, some are real, but others were planted to misdirect you. Samuel was instructed to provide false leads. We've all been manipulated in different ways. Michael's revelation layered another coat of confusion onto the already complex tapestry of betrayal. Grace felt as if the very ground beneath her was shifting. The network of betrayal was far more intricate than she had first suspected. Michael continued, Our mission has always been to uncover the manipulation at the top, but now you see that the deception reaches deeper than personal ambitions. It's a system built on secrets and treachery. His words carried the weight of impending doom, yet within them lay a spark, a challenge to look beyond the betrayal and to see the bigger picture. Her mind whirled with questions. Who else was compromised? How could she continue her fight when even the ones closest to her were ensnared in this web? The emotional impact was immense. Every trusted conversation, every whispered secret now felt like a potential snare designed to ensnare her in layers of deceit. A heavy silence fell once again, punctuated only by the soft hum of the terminal outside. Grace, finding strength amidst the whirlwind of betrayal, exhaled slowly, her eyes hardening into a steely resolve. I will not let this betrayal be the end of us, she declared, her voice trembling with a mixture of pain and newfound determination. Every lie, every misdirection, only fuels my resolve to get to the truth. Our enemies think they can hide behind false facades and manipulated evidence, but in the end, they will all be exposed. In that instant, the meaning of her quest shifted. No longer was it simply about reclaiming dignity after an affront in the boarding gate. It was about dismantling the intricate network of deception that had infiltrated every level of her world. Samuel's betrayal, as gut-wrenching as it was, became a catalyst, a dark secret that would drive her to question every motive and scrutinize every allegiance. With the storm outside gathering strength, Grace resolved to forge ahead, even as the implications of the betrayal threatened to overwhelm her. The emotional stakes had never been higher, and the true battle for justice was just beginning. In that moment of raw vulnerability and resolute defiance, the first twist redefined her journey transforming personal pain into the fuel for an all-consuming quest to tear down the walls of deception and reclaim the truth no matter the cost. Grace felt the weight of every step as she walked through the deserted halls of the airport after the confession. The night had draped itself around the building like a heavy cloak, and the glowing exit signs were beacons of hope amid the uncertainty. Outside, a sudden autumn rain began to fall, each drop echoing the relentless turmoil within her. The betrayal by Samuel and the revelation from Michael had shaken her to the core. Now, with dark skies overhead and the roar of the rain outside, her mission seemed more perilous than ever before. Inside her temporary safe house, a modest room tucked away behind the airport, Grace sat at a small wooden desk. The rain tapped persistently against the window, merging with the sound of her racing heartbeat. Her hands trembled as she spread out the documents Michael had provided. Each paper, each signature, and every annotated note was a puzzle piece in a much larger, sinister picture. The documents painted a chilling portrait, a network of corruption that infiltrated not only the airline, but extended to many corporate echelons. But what troubled her most was the personal cost. Trust, once a steadfast companion, now felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Grace's phone buzzed again with a call. It was Rebecca. The soft ring seemed to echo in the stillness of the room. After a brief pause, Grace answered, her voice low and determined. "Rebecca, what's happening?" she asked, trying to keep the desperation from her tone. On the other end, Rebecca's voice wavered between fear and resolve. "I've discovered yet another piece of this puzzle. I intercepted a confidential report from one of our suppliers, a report that shows a clear pattern of data manipulation. It's as if every decision, every investment was made on false pretenses. But there's something else, Grace. I overheard a conversation, a voice that sounded just like Samuel's. He was not just a pawn, he was a player, actively steering misinformation. I don't know how many of us are in his shadow." The words stung like bitter winter wind. Grace closed her eyes and recalled the painful memory of Samuel's confession. She now understood that his betrayal was not a single act of weakness, but part of a deliberate design. "I need to regroup," she said finally, her voice steadier. "We must gather every fragment of evidence and plan our next move carefully. I can't let this network thrive, even if it means sacrificing everything." Outside, the rain intensified as if nature itself wanted to cleanse the corruption from her life. Within the cramped room, another phone call came, this time from Emily. The frightened voice on the line spoke of a near-miss encounter earlier that day. "I saw men in dark uniforms near the terminal. They were watching me," Emily revealed in a trembling whisper. "I hid behind a column until they passed. I fear they were sent to silence anyone who gets too close to the truth." Every word deepened the tension inside Grace. She knew that Emily's testimony was dangerous. It underscored that the conspiracies were not just distant talk, but were manifesting through real threats. She reassured Emily, "Stay safe, Emily. We will protect you. We are all in this together." But even as she said the words, Grace's mind churned with doubt. The trust she placed in those around her now came with a high cost. As midnight approached, the storm outside mirrored her internal battle. Grace rose from her desk and walked slowly to the small kitchenette. The room was silent except for the rain and a low hum of an old refrigerator. She made herself a cup of tea, the warmth of the mug a small comfort amidst her inner cold. Sitting down at the table, she allowed the tea to soothe her frayed nerves momentarily. Yet the taste of betrayal lingered like a bitter aftertaste that no sweetness could dispel. In a flash of memory, Grace recalled her childhood with Samuel and Rebecca, days filled with laughter, shared secrets, and unwavering trust. That part of her life felt like a different era, untouched by the corruption of the corporate world. Now that innocence seemed shattered, replaced by a hardened resolve to fight a battle that threatened not just her career, but her very soul. The tears that welled up in her eyes were not just for herself, but for everyone who had been deceived and harmed by this vast network of deceit. Another call came through, and this one was for Michael. "Grace, Michael began, his tone low and conspiratorial. "We have a lead. There's a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, one that was once used for storing high-value shipments. I believe it now serves as a secret drop point for the corrupted funds and illegal transactions tied to our case." Michael's news was both a glimmer of hope and an escalation of danger. Venturing into that warehouse meant facing unknown forces with resources that could subdue a determined individual like Grace. "I'm heading there tonight," Grace declared without hesitation. "I need to know if the conspiracy runs as deep as it appears." Michael hesitated on the other end. "Be careful, Grace. This is not just about finding evidence. It's a trap designed to expose the extent of their network. There might be more of them waiting in the shadows than we anticipated." The conversation left Grace with the ever-present knowledge that every step was a risk. Every decision now carried the weight of potentially triggering a retaliatory response from powerful adversaries. As she prepared to leave the safe house, she reviewed her internal checklist, ensuring she had the documents, a secure phone, and enough courage to face the unknown. Packing a small bag, she paused to reflect on the moral gravity of her situation. The lines between right and wrong were now blurred by betrayal and survival. Was the cost of uncovering the truth worth the endless peril that lay ahead? Stepping into the storm, Grace felt the wind batter her face with unyielding force. The rain, cold and relentless, reminded her that the path to justice was not paved with comfort. Her car, parked in the lot under a flickering streetlight, seemed to wait like an old friend ready to carry her into the fray. Inside, she listened to the raindrops against the roof of her vehicle, each a harsh note in a symphony of distrust and determination. On the drive to the warehouse, every red light, every slow-moving car felt like an omen. Each time her eyes drifted back to the documents on her seat, the gravity of her discovery sunk deeper into her heart. She replayed the events of the evening, Samuel's confession, Emily's fear, Rebecca's urgent whispers, and wondered which of them could still be trusted. The ethical dilemmas twisted inside her. Loyalty had turned into a shifting mirage, and every person held secrets that could ignite another explosion of betrayal. Arriving at the warehouse, tucked away in an industrial part of the city, Grace parked discreetly and switched off the engine. The building loomed before her, its exterior a canvas of peeling paint and broken windows. Shadows danced along the walls as lightning illuminated the scene sporadically. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping out. Each step towards the warehouse echoed like a heartbeat, drawing her inevitably into the heart of danger. Inside the warehouse, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of water dripping from a leaky roof and the soft scuttle of unseen creatures. Grace moved cautiously, her senses sharpened by the anticipation of ambush. Every creak of the metal floor under her boots raised the tension. She remembered Michael's warning. Hidden within these walls might be the very people who orchestrated the entire deception. As Grace delved deeper, a low rumble of voices echoed from a distant corner. Quickening her pace, she crept closer to the source of the noise. Her eyes caught glimpses of movement, furtive glances, hurried exchanges that confirmed her worst fears. The warehouse was not abandoned. Here, like a nest of vipers, lay the results of meticulous planning and far-reaching betrayal. Then, in a dim corner of the vast space, she found a computer terminal glowing faintly. On its screen, a series of encrypted messages scrolled continuously. Grace's heart raced as she deciphered fragments of emails between high-ranking officials and unknown associates. The messages confirmed what she had been suspecting all along. Her personal humiliation, the betrayal of a trusted friend, and the deeper corruption within the airline were all interconnected by a master plan designed to suppress dissent and maintain power at any cost. Caught in that moment, Grace faced an internal crisis. The evidence was damning, and the path to justice lay ahead, riddled with dangers. Would exposing all of this destroy the only semblance of loyalty left among her allies? Or could the truth, however painful, pave the way for redemption and reform? The weight of this decision pressed down on her like the storm outside, and yet surrender was not an option. Closing her eyes briefly, Grace took a deep breath. The decision was clear. She would not let the corruption win. With renewed determination, she backed up the incriminating files onto a secure drive and prepared to leave the warehouse, fully aware that her every move might now be under the watchful eyes of those who had betrayed her trust. As she slipped into the night, once more, the rain washing away any lingering doubts, Grace Montgomery embraced the escalating tension. Each challenge, both external and internal, had transformed her into a warrior of truth. The cost was high and the future uncertain, but she was ready to confront every danger head-on, even if it meant standing alone in the tempest of deceit and betrayal. In the early hours before dawn, the city was shrouded in a heavy mist that blurred the harsh outlines of reality. Grace Montgomery drove through empty streets, her car's headlights carving through darkness like twin beacons of defiance. Tonight was the night when all hidden truths would step into the light, a night when the web of deceit would unravel in a final explosive confrontation. Grace arrived at the abandoned executive wing of the airline's headquarters, a cold concrete building that had once embodied power and prestige. Inside, the corridors were deserted but for the murmur of urgent whispers that echoed through long-forgotten halls. The evidence she had gathered over the past days, a series of confidential emails, internal memos, and financial reports, glowed on her secure drive like a secret waiting for its moment. With every step, the clatter of her determined heels along the cracked marble floors resonated like a heartbeat against the silence. At the center of the building lay a vast conference room with walls lined with panoramic windows that opened out to the sleeping city. Here, the conspirators had gathered under the guise of a routine meeting. The room was stark, its modern design a mask for the corruption that festered within the airline. Grace paused in the doorway, her eyes sweeping over the stern faces of high-ranking executives, and even Samuel, whose presence here filled her with a turbulent mix of betrayal and lingering hope. The lights were dimmed, save for a single spotlight that illuminated a sleek mahogany table. At the head of the table sat Mr. Charles Anderson, a man renowned for his icy resolve and ruthlessness in preserving the company's secrets. His eyes met Grace's as she stepped into space, and for a moment, time halted, the weight of every unspoken word pressed upon them both. Grace, Charles intoned, his voice a measured blend of surprise and barely concealed contempt. "I must say, I did not expect you to show up tonight." The room fell into a charged silence. Grace's voice, steady yet full of raw emotion, broke the stillness. "I have come for the truth," she declared. "For too long, the voices of those wronged have been silenced. I stand here not only for myself, but for every person who has suffered at the hands of this corruption." As her words echoed off the pristine walls, a murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Samuel's eyes flickered with guilt as he sat at the table. His betrayal, his confession, and his painful admission haunted him now. Charles sneered. "You speak of truth, yet you know nothing of loyalty or the consequences of defiance." Grace's gaze hardened, her eyes blazing with determination. "Loyalty is a two-way street. I trusted you, Samuel, and even you, Charles, once held honor above all. But now it is clear that your ambition is built on lies and treachery." The tension in the room climbed, every breath laden with anticipation and the danger of imminent collapse. The turning point came when Michael, standing in the back of the room, stepped forward. In his hand, he held a projector remote. With it, he cast the incriminating documents onto a wide white screen. The images were vivid. Lines of confidential correspondence, spreadsheets detailing manipulated accounts, and evidence of bribery that connected each person in the room to the vast scheme to defraud and suppress. Even Samuel could no longer hide behind his whispered excuses as the truth was laid bare before all. A heavy silence draped over the room as the evidence hovered in the air like an unyielding judge. Grace's voice broke through once more, softer now but laden with righteous fury. "You thought you could bury these secrets in shadows, but I have brought them to light. It is time for accountability." Charles's eyes narrowed, and his voice, icy and precise, began to rise. This is preposterous. You have no idea what you are doing. This evidence, it is manipulated, tainted. At that moment, Rebecca stepped up, her face etched with both regret and fierce determination. Charles, you have been orchestrating this for too long, she said. Your network of deceit has robbed innocent people of their Her voice carried across the room, punctuating every accusation with undeniable weight. The final blow came from Samuel. His voice, laden with remorse, rang out as he confessed, I was wrong. I was manipulated into playing both sides, and I see now that there are no excuses for what I have done. I beg forgiveness and ask that my confession helps rectify the damage. His admission reverberated through the room, a cathartic release of years of internal torment. It was a fraught moment, a fragile bridge between betrayal and redemption. For a moment, even Charles's steely facade wavered as he regarded the crumbling alliances before him. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, torn between loyalty to a failing order and the dawning possibility of justice. The storm outside howled as if it, too, rejected the deceit that had cloaked this place for so long. Grace then spoke, her voice rising above the chaotic murmur. Tonight, we choose truth over complacency. We choose justice over the comfort of false security. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the power of her conviction as the conspirators looked on, a mixture of fear, anger, and resignation in their eyes. As lightning flashed through the panoramic windows, illuminating the room in stark, momentary clarity, Grace advanced toward Charles. In that fleeting moment, she recalled every slight, every betrayal, and every tear shed by those who had suffered. Your power ends tonight, she declared. The words, though simple, held a resonance that shook the very foundation of the corrupted system. The confrontation reached a fever pitch as security personnel, previously kept in the wings, were mobilized by Michael's earlier alert. Officers in plain clothes arrived, their presence signaling that the broader system was now awakening to the reality of the scandal. Charles tried to muster defiance, but his eyes darted nervously as the forces of accountability closed in. In those final heartbeats, the once impenetrable wall of deception began to crumble. The room erupted in chaos, a cacophony of shouts, the clatter of falling documents, and the relentless patter of rain against the glass. Grace stood firm amidst the storm, a beacon of unwavering resolve. Her journey from humiliation to enlightenment had culminated in this decisive moment. Now, as the conspirators were led away and the evidence secured for further inquiry, Grace took a slow, deliberate breath. The intensity of the confrontation gave way to a deep, reflective silence. The emotional scars of betrayal remained, but they mingled with a new hope. Hope that the truth, however painful, would pave the way for a fairer, more just future. Standing in that conference room, bathed in the aftermath of storm and revelation, Grace pondered the cost of her pursuit. She realized that the greatest strength often arose from vulnerability, and that the darkest nights paved the way for the brightest dawns. In her heart, she knew that the journey ahead would still be fraught with challenges, but today's victory was a reminder that even a single voice, when powered by courage and conviction, can change the course of history. As dawn finally broke over the horizon, casting gentle light on the faces of those gathered, Grace Montgomery felt a bittersweet relief. The battle had been hard fought, and the cost was immeasurable, but the moral fabric of truth had been restored, if only for the moment. In that fragile morning light, the path forward shimmered with possibilities, a promise that while betrayal may scar, it also teaches the resilience needed to rebuild a world worthy of justice and hope. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, the once tempestuous boardroom now lay in a state of hushed stillness, its stark fluorescent lights casting elongated shadows over the remnants of shattered deception. The confiscated documents were secured, and the conspirators, their power finally broken, were led away under the steady scrutiny of law enforcement. Grace Montgomery lingered at the center of the room, her gaze fixed on the panoramic window where the pale glow of dawn battled the retreating darkness. The storm had subsided outside, leaving behind a crystalline calm that mirrored the clarity taking root within her. Grace took a slow, measured breath as she stepped closer to the window. The cool morning air mingled with the lingering scent of rain and antiseptic, a reminder that the battle was far from over. Yet a victory had been earned in exposing the rot at the heart of the system. In that reflective silence, every memory surfaced. Moments of humiliation that had once defined her spirit, whispered betrayals that had nearly broken her resolve, and now the hard-won triumph that blazed like a beacon of hope. Her mind wandered back to the night's turmoil, a night when every fear and every loss coalesced into a singular, undeniable truth. Samuel's trembling confession, Rebecca's resolute outcry, Michael's quiet determination, and even Emily's panicked warnings had all built up to this decisive moment. Each voice, once mired in uncertainty and self-doubt, now contributed to a symphony of accountability and reform. Yet, as she stood amid the lingering echoes of conflict, Grace could not help but feel a profound weight upon her soul, a deep realization that even though the immediate battle had been won, the moral scars would linger like delicate, unhealed wounds. The room around her told a story of transformation. The scattered remains of confidential files, the overturned chairs, and the abandoned remnants of hidden agendas were now relics of a past marked by corruption. Grace gently gathered one of the stray papers, the ink still fresh with its urgency, and held it up as if it were both evidence and a symbol of the sacrifices made. In that simple act, she recognized the duality of truth, its power to destroy old orders and its relentless call for renewal. A soft sound behind her made her turn. Rebecca stood quietly in the doorway, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Grace," she murmured, stepping closer, "we did it." Her voice carried not the triumph of victory, but the solemnity of understanding the cost that had come with it. Grace nodded, her expression tender as she replied, "Yes, but sometimes victory isn't a clean slate. It's a mosaic of every decision, every pain we've had to endure to get to this moment." Outside, the city stirred awake, unaware of the night's revelations and the personal toll they had exacted. Grace invited Rebecca to sit beside her at a polished window ledge. Together, they watched as the sun crept slowly over the skyline, painting the horizon in hues of pink and gold, a quiet promise of new beginnings. In that fragile light, Grace felt both the exhaustion of what had been lost and the cautious optimism for what could be rebuilt. Her thoughts shifted to Samuel, whose remorseful confession had not absolved him, but had exposed the intricate balance between survival and integrity. Grace recalled his whispered apology, a plea marred by the stain of complicity. Though anger had once smoldered within her at his betrayal, she now recognized the layers of desperation that had driven him to compromise. "We all have shadows in us," she softly remarked, almost to herself. "But perhaps it is only when we face them that the true light of redemption can emerge." Rebecca's eyes welled with unshed tears as she listened, understanding that the battle was not solely against corruption in the institution, but against the darkness that resided in each heart. Their shared silence spoke of the many questions left unanswered. Could a trust so severely shattered ever be fully restored? Could they ever find the courage to forgive themselves for the roles they had played in a system that had dehumanized them? Grace did not offer immediate answers. Instead, she allowed the morning's serene beauty to envelop them, a reminder that every day brought with it the chance to start anew. A gentle knock at the door disrupted the introspective calm. It was Michael, his expression somber yet carrying a spark of hope. "The authorities are setting up a secure briefing room," he informed, his voice low. "We need to consolidate everything and prepare for the next steps in this investigation. There's still a lot to untangle." Grace nodded, glancing between her companions. "Our journey isn't over," she acknowledged, "but at least tonight, we can honor what we've accomplished." Her words were neither triumphant nor despairing, but a balanced recognition of the thin line between victory and the hard truths that remained. As they gathered the last of the evidence to hand over to those who promised to delve deeper into the case, Grace's inner voice urged her to remember the faces and the moments that had led her here, each one a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming betrayal. Later that morning, after a flurry of interviews with investigators and the quiet clearance of the building, Grace found herself alone once more. The remnants of the night's confrontation had been transformed into a powerful catalyst for change, but now she needed to face herself. In the solitude of her modest office, overlooking a courtyard, Grace began to write, her handwriting a deliberate script of reflection and resolve. She chronicled the events not just as a record of the conspiracy she had dismantled, but as a personal journey marked by anguish, betrayal, and ultimately, the reawakening of her inner strength. In each line, she poured her moral reckonings, the understanding that truth, while liberating, could also be a heavy burden to bear, that the pain of betrayal might be unbearable at times, yet it was necessary to uproot the rot that had taken hold, and that forgiveness, both of others and of oneself, was perhaps the most formidable act of rebellion against injustice. As she wrote, Grace contemplated the paradox of her struggle. The very system that had tried to diminish her had, in its collapse, exposed the raw and indispensable value of integrity. Each sacrifice made, each tear shed, had contributed to a larger narrative of accountability and hope, a narrative that she felt compelled to share, not to boast of her own courage, but to remind others that even in the depths of despair, the light of truth could ignite change. The pages filled slowly as dawn advanced into a bright, unblemished morning. With every word, Grace affirmed that while the scars of betrayal would remain, they would also serve as a reminder of the cost of silence and the enduring power of speaking out. In resolving the chaos of her past, she had come to accept that some wounds were essential to growth, and that through the painful process of confronting her own moral dilemmas, she had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. In the end, as the city awoke with promise and potential, Grace Montgomery closed her journal. Her eyes, although tired, shone with a clarity that had been hard-won. The resolution of the central conflict was not a neatly tied ending, but an ongoing commitment, a mission to preserve the truth, safeguard the vulnerable, and continually strive for a system free of exploitation. The reflective silence of that morning was as much an ending as it was a beginning, a quiet affirmation that every act of courage, every moment of introspection, had carved a path toward a future where justice might one day prevail. And as she stepped out into the gentle light of the new day, Grace carried with her the bittersweet understanding that while betrayal had left its mark, it had also sparked a transformation rooted in the unyielding belief that truth, no matter how elusive, was worth every ounce of sacrifice. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.